The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are simply that, opinions. All are presumed innocent until proven otherwise in a court of law. Sensitive topics are discussed. Discretion is advised.
On this week's Court TV podcast, the Netflix documentary Tiger King has become a national sensation and opens the door to a number of legal issues. Was Joe Exotic set up? Could his nemesis, Carol Baskin, come under more police scrutiny due to the publicity? Plus, we'll discuss the constitutional implications of COVID-19 and religious liberty and get an update on what Harvey Weinstein's life is like in prison.
This is the Court TV podcast with Vinnie and Seema Iyer.
Welcome to the Court TV podcast. I'm Seema Iyer with Vinnie. We are still socially distant, but the good news is we are bringing you the podcast every week, and we are back on the air.
That's right. We're back on. We're back on Court TV. We're live every night from 8 to 11, so check us out there, number one. Number two, let me tell you, Seema, being socially isolated the way I am, right?
In your dungeon.
Locked up with a little bit of extra time because no commuting or anything. Got more time to watch some TV other than Court TV. And I've been on Netflix, and like millions of other Americans, am obsessed and hooked and binged on Tiger King.
Okay, well, you have to give Julie Grant credit because Julie Grant, our other co-anchor, she got you hooked on Tiger King, and then you just fell for it.
Absolutely. And I went all in, did it all in like a day and a half, and learned a lot. You know, when we signed up for Court TV, they said, okay, Seema, we want you to be a hard-hitting legal journalist. You're going to be overwhelmed with assignments. You're writing, you're producing, you're anchoring, you're reporting. And then I was told, you have to sit at home and watch Tiger King. And I asked for a raise. I didn't get one. And I tried, okay? So this is a legal story. That's what you need to understand. This is a legal story in two senses. On the one sense, you've got an unsolved mystery that could be a true crime. And on the other hand, you had an actual federal trial, Seema Iyer, a federal trial. Oh, should we say this? Spoiler alert. Okay, There we go. Did it already. If you haven't binged, you need to. But if you haven't, you'll still enjoy what we're going to talk about here because Seema refuses to watch the whole series.
Well, it's not that I refuse because so when I was cleaning the apartment this weekend, under the strict orders of our podcast producer, you must watch Tiger King. I really tried. But my problem is I find it so disturbing. I find it really disturbing, Joe Exotic. And I do feel sorry for him because I think this is just one of the first episodes. I only got through, 2 or 3. You know, when he talks about how hard it was for him to come out and as a gay man and you know, how his father completely rejected him. And I have a point here, Vinny. I think this is the example of people whose lives fall apart when they don't have parents who support them. I mean, people like you and me, we have the greatest parents, right? Like we've always talked about how our parents have supported us, even changing careers, all of this.
So what you're saying
but his life fell apart because his father rejected him. Go.
If Joe Exotic was raised by our parents, it would be we wouldn't have this show. Well, here let me tell you this. Here's the big takeaway though is that by the end of the series, again, spoiler alert, there's a trial, federal trial for Joe Exotic, and it has to do with two things. One, a murder for hire plot against his rival, Carol Baskin, who she runs a big cat rescue in Florida. He runs a private zoo, exotic zoo in Oklahoma. And they're rivals because he feels like she's out to destroy him, and he publicly speaks about destroying her and ultimately gets indicted for a murder for hire plot, but also charges against him involving the treatment of the wildlife, of the treatment of these big cats at his zoo. So he has a trial, and he's convicted at this trial, Seema. Yet,
yes,
many people like you and me who watch this show kind of felt a little bit bad for Joe Exotic.
You know why? Because Carol and her husband are the most annoying busybodies I've ever looked at. I watched enough to know that I hate them both. They're so freaking annoying, and I still can't conceptually see the difference between what Carol is doing. I mean, Carol has people working for her for next to nothing. You know, she's got all these people volunteering. I can't really see the difference between Carol and Doc Antle and Joe Exotic. To me, they're all the same. And I do feel bad. I do feel bad to the extent that Joe got convicted, because I think a lot of people want to kill Carol. I think it's like, get in line.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I spoke with one of the jurors, and the one takeaway, which I suspected from the beginning, anytime you watch one of these docuseries, whether it's Making a Murderer or any of these other ones that come out, the producers are producing television. They're not trying a case. So they get to be the judges. They get to decide what comes in and what comes out. Like a judge decides what evidence the jury gets to hear, a producer of a series gets to decide what the viewers get to see. And what this juror told me is that two completely different stories. One is the docuseries, the other is the trial. And she says that, you know what, they left a lot of the information out of the docuseries. And you have to take it with a grain of salt, which I always do, because I always feel like there's more to the story.
And this really reminds me, Vinny, of the Durst trial, okay? Because the same type of conversation was happening between the HBO docuseries The Jinx as opposed to the real trial, which of course has been halted because of the COVID-19 crisis. But again, the journalist's, filmmaker's responsibility to the audience is very different than ours as lawyers. And there is no question that Tiger King is entertaining and also informative and also a legal story. There's no question. It's just, though, it is a car crash. And okay, when are we talking about Doc Antle being a sex trafficker? Because that is real. That is he's 100%.
I can neither confirm nor deny those allegations that you're making here, Seema.
I think we should open a Court TV investigates against Doc Antle.
And this is another one of these a big cat guys. He's down in South Carolina doing his thing. He's had his own legal troubles now as well. And I think with the spotlight shining on all of this, people are taking a closer look. So here's what I want to do, Seema, because I had an opportunity to speak with this juror.
Yes.
When we come back, we're going to hear what the juror had to say about her impressions of Joe Exotic and his rival, the victim in the trial in which she was a juror, Carol Baskin. That is next.
Follow Court TV live over the air, uninterrupted. If you're watching television with an antenna, just rescan your channels now to add Court TV. And go to CourtTV.com to see the exact channel position and more ways to watch Court TV in your area.
Welcome back to the Court TV podcast, and we're talking about what millions of Americans other than Seema Iyer are talking about, because they all watched it, and she gave up too early on Tiger King.
You know, I've put in a request to our bosses that instead of our new primetime show, 8 to 11 p.m., hosted by Vinnie Politan, we just call it Tiger King Live.
There you go.
Or Court TV Tiger King, because we are wall-to-wall time. And God bless Joe Exotic for giving us legal news in the time of coronavirus. Thank you, Joe Exotic.
Absolutely. So I had an opportunity to speak with one of the jurors from his federal trial. Spoiler alert again. And I asked her about Joe Exotic, what she thought of this man. Take a listen.
He said, "My name is Joseph Maldonado Passage, and I'm the reason you're all here." And that I knew right then that it was going to be kind of a crazy ride. Just because there's a difference between saying you want somebody dead and actually going to the lengths that he did on his show to shoot a blow-up doll. We never never questioned that he wanted her dead.
So it seems like it was pretty clear from the beginning of this trial that they were in for quite a ride. And obviously they were. It wasn't the longest trial, but it was one full of all the characters that you saw from Netflix. Many of them ended up testifying, Seema.
I wish that we were aware of the case back then, because I think that it would have just... I mean, could you imagine? First of all, could you just imagine the fashion between Joe Exotic's pink lame button down and his tight jeans?
Don't forget the mullet. The mullet still intact at trial. So amazingly. Now, here's the thing. In the end, she really didn't like Joe Exotic. He did not come across as a likable character. He was a guy who she believed was driven by ego and driven by money. And everything that he did, whether it was relative to the Tigers or to her, was driven by his ego and money.
I was just going to say that. I think I watched enough I feel sorry for him at times, but what bothers me is that he's really not likable. And when you see how incredible they are with animals, I admire that as well, because I think it's really hard to kind of have that relationship with wild animals, not be scared and even be just compassionate with them. But he's just not likable. There's no warmth in him, and he seems completely narcissistic and self-absorbed.
All he wanted was fame. And you know, he was driven
but he has a good voice.
Well, is it his voice or is it Milli Vanilli? We're not sure on that point.
I think Julie Grant's investigating that. She's part of the Court TV Investigates Tiger King bureau that we've set up now. We've opened a bureau.
King I team. The Tiger King I team.
Well, right, and Julie Grant and Lauren Rudisill are co-bureau chiefs.
Yeah, they're working. They're working the story. That's what you do.
Like round the clock. I mean, I don't think those two sleep because Tiger King is 24/7. You can't sleep with Tiger King.
So now, on the other hand, like I understood the way she how Joe Exotic came across to her, that he was egotistical, driven by money, just wanted fame. Everything was about him, treated people meanly, and in the end, if the Tigers weren't making money for him, he was going to get rid of the Tiger, and that ultimately was his downfall in front of the jury. Now, I asked her also about Carol Baskin, because in the trial, she's the victim, right? There's two parts of it. There's the wildlife charges, and then there are the charges for murder for hire. Here's what she had to say about the victim, Carol Baskin.
I guess technically she's the victim, but she sure didn't give that impression on the stand. She I can only speak for myself, but I didn't care for her. She seemed to almost antagonize him from the stand, kind of looking over at him and just giving him these looks when she thought nobody was looking, and then saying that she just didn't even want to be in the same room with him and she was afraid of him. And I just didn't have any sympathy for her.
So she is not, doesn't come across great either during the trial, but it didn't impact the jury during their deliberations, because Seema, what she told me was that they deliberated for a very quick time. I mean, they're only out for a few hours in total for like 19 charges, but they were like done with the murder for hire super fast, and then got to work on the animal charges. So despite the fact that she may not have come across as likable, ultimately, they believed she was a victim here.
Because of the evidence. Think about it. He was so out there, so public with his disdain and vitriol towards this woman that they had no choice but to come to a quick decision. I think where they were torn is really when you do see how he takes care of the animals. You just... I don't know. You question it. You question, is he really harming them? He's not like my grandfather. I have to tell the story. You know, my grandfather was a big game hunter. So my mom, had this arranged marriage, got married to my dad. They come from India on what airline? Wait for it, Air India, because that's where all the Indians flew back then. So they fly on Air India. And I don't know how we got it in our house in New Jersey, but we grew up with the these two leopard skins, like with the heads. So we have the head and the teeth, and then all the kids in the neighborhood would come over to see the Ayers dead animals.
Dead animal zoo. There you go.
Yeah.
Seema
And in my
exotic.
parents' divorce, they fought over those leopard skins. My mom won. I mean, it was her dad. It seemed only fair. But anyway, that was my little sidebar.
Yeah. Now I'm trying to remember what I was talking about. Oh yeah, Joe Exotic.
The trial.
Well, but here was the problem with Joe Exotic, and basically, if the way the case was explained to the jury, which was a little bit different than the way it came across in the Netflix show, was that when these tigers outlived their usefulness, and he had space for 3 tigers, and someone wanted to pay him to board a tiger, he would kill a tiger to make space for a tiger that he was going to gain revenue from. And that's where he ran into big trouble with this jury. The other thing that she did say, though, was that based upon the trial, there was a difference. And the big difference between Carol Baskin and Joe Exotic was, and this picture was painted in the courtroom as well, is that Joe Exotic used tiger cubs as these for petting, and she doesn't do that. What she does in her rescue is just have the big cats. They live there till they die. So some people are still going to argue there's not much of a difference, but for some people there is a big difference.
But do you know, and I'm really curious, is there any evidence to support that letting people, visitors to this park, pet tiger cubs, is that dangerous to the tiger cubs? Is it harmful?
I think there's a split. In the community. A lot of people believe that is not right. You shouldn't be doing that. But then take a look at all the talk shows through the years, the late night shows. They always have these tiger cubs on. My goodness, in the Netflix series, you see that they bring them onto the floor of Congress, and you've got members of Congress petting the tiger cubs. So,
oh my God,
I
because
don't know.
some of them are so cute. They're really, really cute. Yeah. Okay, all right. So next up, we're going to shift gears a little bit. We have to talk about what is going on in this world, and a big issue for a lot of people during this pandemic is how they can pray. Where do you find a house of worship? Are houses of worship still allowed to congregate? Vinny and I are going to talk about that after this.
For more Court TV, watch it on cable, over the air, Roku, or go to CourtTV.com and stream live gavel-to-gavel coverage. Catch up on the big moments from our current cases and relive some of Court TV's most historic trials. Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
The eternal battle, church versus state. But in the time of COVID-19, who should win, Vinny?
I think this is not a clean-cut case. You know, you're talking about constitutional rights, freedom to peaceably assemble, freedom of religion, freedom of expression and speech, and you kind of wrap those all together. And yes, we've got these public safety issues, and we've got orders being sent out by governors across the country. So the question is, can people or can they not congregate in their congregations? Can they get together to worship? Is there a way to constitutionally stop people and prohibit this from happening? So I think you can, but you have to do it in the least restrictive manner possible, okay? Can people congregate? Well, maybe if they're all 8 feet apart or 6 feet apart in an open area, I don't know. But to just shut it down altogether, sure. I think if it goes to court and goes up the ladder, there's going to be a justice somewhere who's going to say, wait a minute.
Well, the battle is happening now in our country. Pastors are fighting to keep their congregations alive. And Ted Rollins did this great piece. It's on CourtTV.com. And he talked about this happening all across the country, but focused on this one case happening now. A lawsuit has been filed. It's in Texas. And the pastor involved, Pastor Bustamante, is the plaintiff in this action, and he's basically trying to lift a judge's restriction. Let's listen to a little bit of what Pastor Bustamante has to say.
We're not doing anything different than we normally do. This is our calling. This is our high calling from God, and we believe that God is there and God is protecting us. So, I mean, this is our convictions. And I mean, you know, every man or woman is made up their convictions. We rise and our fall in our convictions, and that's our convictions. And we believe that what we're doing is right. We're not trying to hurt or become a burden to our city officials. We're trying to help.
So, in essence, the pastor is saying you can infringe upon our First Amendment right, freedom of a religion. It's just it's not acceptable during this time. There's just not enough evidence. What do you think in general? Just what is your opinion of his argument?
The arguments they're making are interesting because they're talking about, okay, well, you're not restricting people from going to these big stores, you know, whether it's Costco, supermarket, liquor stores. And if you look at some of the scenes of people together in these stores, and you're wondering, okay, if they can go there to do that, to get food, why can't they do the same thing to pray? So if you've got the government treating one class of services / businesses one way and another way, that's where you run into trouble. Like if it's a bright line rule and everyone is treated the same, that's okay. But if you're treating churches different than you're treating liquor stores and food stores, that could be a problem. That could be a real constitutional problem. And I think what you need to do is carve out a way that they can do it in a way that's safe. Some alternative way. We know video is one way, but if they don't want to do video, they want to do it in person. Well, there has to be a way for people to do it.
Okay, and there is. Well, let's first, before you and I go further into the legal discussion, let's listen to what the lawyer involved has to say.
With respect to the larger churches, what we call the mega churches, those having tens of thousands of people, it doesn't have near the impact on them. The people that get really impacted are the small to medium-sized churches. Those churches like Pastor Bustamante's that have approximately 100 people or so every Sunday or every Wednesday night. It's those individuals that are being shut down and put out of business. Additionally, the Bible tells them that we are to come together as a congregation, as a body of believers. And so for them, that is a deeply held religious belief. And to the extent that the government comes in and says you cannot exercise that deeply held religious belief that you find in the Bible, then we believe that that is an infringement on their First Amendment liberties. And that's what we're asking the courts to rule. We're asking the courts to look at Judge Hidalgo's order, to declare it void and invalid and unconstitutional, and then to issue what's called an injunction, something prohibiting it from going forward.
Okay, so that's what the lawyer has to say about defending Pastor Bustamante's.
Here's the one thing that strikes me, because there's going to be arguments about the religion and healing people and giving people hope and everything that they need during a trying time like this. But I'm wondering how much of this is driven by that versus getting those collections.
Thank you, because you heard what I heard, the word business. Listen, You know what, Vinny, you want hope? Go on Oprah's Twitter feed. She'll give you plenty of hope. Or do what everybody else is doing. And this is the truth. We are, and it's so funny. The night before Ted did this segment, excuse me, I was actually looking online for online services, Hindu services, and all seriousness. I mean, I think, we're all scared about what's happening in this world. We're scared for other people. We're scared for ourselves. And I was looking for that. And this is what the law says. The law says, listen, if you're going to take away one of my constitutional rights, you better have a good reason. Of course, a little more articulate than I am, but I'm street. So I'm giving you the street definition. So you better give me an alternative, Vincent. And here's your alternative. You have online. And here's I just want to make a point. I think that, I completely, when you were bringing up the argument about this food stores being open, liquor stores being open, those are essential services. I'm sorry. I know you don't drink, but me and the rest of the human race does.
No,
and we need it.
I agree. No, I agree. Those are essential services, but, services are essential services. And for many people, they rely upon this for their mental health, right? For a way to make it through here. So I understand that part. See, whenever you're taking away a constitutional right, you have to do it in the least restrictive manner possible. And just a blanket, you can't do it, I think is problematic. You need to do it in a way that, okay, why are we taking it away? We're taking it away because of the health risk. Okay, is there a way to do it and not violate that health risk? So an outdoor service with public address speakers and people spread out in areas that are safely apart. Can that get it done? You bring your lawn chair and you're in an area that no one is within 6 feet of you. I think ultimately, if you are trying to stop something like this, you need to do it in a way where you're not just taking it away, you're giving them an opportunity to do it without violating what you are concerned about, which is public safety.
But Pastor Bustamante should have put that in his papers. He should have said, hey, because remember that video in Ted's piece, Bustamante's outdoors. So do what you're saying, kind of separate everybody. Everybody has a designated spot. And then you have whatever the police officers are watching, make sure everybody's safe, and do it that way and have a loudspeaker if you need that person-to-person contact. Absolutely. Okay. So we're still going to stay on the topic of liberties, because up next, we're going to talk about the ACLU. They have just filed a class action lawsuit to release hundreds of high-risk inmates at a federal prison. So this talks to a much bigger issue, and that is inmates, jails, prisons, COVID-19. We'll talk about that next.
Follow Court TV live over the air, uninterrupted. If you're watching television with an antenna, just rescan your channels now to add Court TV. And go to CourtTV.com to see the exact channel position and more ways to watch Court TV in your area.
Okay, the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, has just filed a class action lawsuit seeking the release of hundreds of high-risk inmates at a federal prison. Now, this specifically relates to the one in Louisiana that has claimed the lives of 5 prisoners, Vinny, and infected nearly 24 others. This is not a news story because in general, this is all we've been hearing since the pandemic and that is throughout this country, jails and prisons are hotbed for this infection.
Now, when you say high risk, do you mean high risk to get the coronavirus or high risk to the public when they are released?
I think they mean the former. To get coronavirus. That's what they're saying. Yeah.
Well, I think the public is concerned about the latter of all that. Is okay. Here's the problem. Once you start releasing inmates, right, and prisoners, what is the risk to the public as well? Okay, there's 2 parts of this. We understand the risk to the inmate who's already demonstrated to us, and we're talking about prisoners now, I believe, right? We're talking about prisoners, not people who are presumed innocent. These are people who are convicted.
Yeah, no, we're talking about prisoners because your
convicted
favorite prisoner.
Felons.
Well, yeah, we're going to talk about your favorite prisoner.
Okay, so we put them in the felon bucket.
Finish your point,
okay? So we've got them in the felon bucket. So when we let these felons out early from prison, right, what risk are we now subjecting the rest of the community to, whether it is either their immediate family members who will have to take them in because of all the stay-at-home orders, or to perhaps their neighbors. And I think that is part of the equation here, and we've got to be really careful. And I don't like these blanket releases. I like an individual literally case-by-case review of defendants who are being let loose.
I agree with you on the case-by-case review, but I think you are missing a step, and that is we're not talking about having these like diseased, convicted felons running amok in our streets. There's something called a halfway house. We could put them in a halfway house.
Okay.
What about that?
Okay.
What do you think about that?
Well, here's the other part of it, right? We've got all these social distancing requisites that are being put out there and orders being put out there. How likely are convicted felons to follow orders like that? I mean, they couldn't follow the rules before all this happened. Why
No,
would they start
before,
following the
but
rules
they
now?
may be convicted for a long time. Maybe they've rehabilitated. That's a word, right? Rehabilitated. They could do that.
Maybe they have, but that's why I
Do you
think it's case by case. I mean, I think there's a lot of I think there's some judges out there, and I think there's a lot of lawyers out there who just want to say, okay, if you committed this or you have this many days left, you're out. You get out of prison. You get out of prison. You get out of prison. And I think no, each one gets a hearing, and maybe has to file papers either on their on their own behalf or by some great lawyer who's going to donate their time. But there has to be some level of scrutiny here, because anytime I hear these magical words like what is it, nonviolent offender?
Yeah.
I remember when President Obama was releasing all these nonviolent offenders, and then I actually looked them up, and they were like people convicted of dealing drugs with guns. I'm like, what? A drug dealer with a gun is now a nonviolent offender. See, that's what happens here, and that's what I'm always afraid of.
No, here's the thing. Even back then when Obama was doing that, I completely agree with you, because people who are in their ivory towers talking about crime don't understand crime. Where there are drugs, there are guns. That is the rule of the streets. Everybody knows that. So I'm so sick and tired of people saying nonviolent felony offenders when they're talking about drug dealers, because you cannot be a drug dealer unless you have a piece. Boom. Okay, so now we got to talk about your favorite prisoner. Who's your favorite prisoner of your life?
Not of my life.
Who do you heart?
But
Who do you heart?
Top 10. Harvey Weinstein.
Top 10.
Harvey Weinstein.
You love Harvey
Weinstein. Yeah.
So love him. Okay, so here's you know the deal. They couldn't apply for him to be released because now he's a what?
Convicted rapist.
Yes, he is. So he's a violent felony offender, doesn't qualify to be released. Okay. But I did get to sit down with his prison consultant, because when you're a fancy convicted felon, you get a prison consultant. And this is what Craig Rothfeld had to say about Harvey Weinstein and the prison system.
I think at the onset, it was to just explain to him what could happen, discuss the journey. I often call it the journey. What happens when you enter this Byzantine black hole, which is what it is, the Bermuda Triangle, or, for all the Star Wars fans, it's like the Star Wars cantina scene. I wanted to explain to him what would happen if he was found guilty and they revoked his bail, which would have been no different than he'd say it out on bail when we was sentenced. And, I explained a step-by-step process from the minute you get sentenced and go through that side door and get processed into the Department of Corrections. And an important part of what you do initially is to just discuss the first 90 days. What are those first 90 days like? What does it feel like? What's going to happen to you? Where are you going to go?
So Harvey's still within that first 90 days. Craig Rothfeld still on the case. I asked him a lot of questions, including, hey, Craig, are you recommending which gang Harvey should join? Like, is it the Latin Kings? But he's Jewish. He's not going to get into Latin Kings. Maybe the Bloods, maybe the Crips. Maybe he can start his own gang.
Here's my take. I think he'll do well in prison because he's smart. I think he understands.
Charming. He's charming.
He can be charming. And I think people realize that he has money. So I think if you have money on the inside, there's a way for you to have some level of respect and power as well. So I think he's going to do okay. I think he'll create a new life for himself there. It's not going to be the life he used to had. Much different. But I think he's going to end up surviving.
And I just want our listeners to know, the other Harvey Weinstein fans out there, that according to Mr. Rothfeld, who spoke to Harvey just minutes before he spoke to me, Harvey's health is status quo. He did not confirm or deny whether Harvey was in fact infected with the coronavirus, but health is the same. So there you have it.
All right. We wrapped it up, and we did a podcast almost without Harvey Weinstein. He keeps lingering.
No,
like-
from now on, for the rest of
It's-
our lives, it's going to be Harvey Weinstein, Tiger King, and maybe some law sprinkled in.
It's that thing you can't scrape off the bottom of your foot. What do they call that? Anyhow. Hey, this has been great. Once again, folks, don't forget you can listen to us every week on a podcast, but we also have TV shows, and we've got this great show that's going right now during our special programming from 8 to 11 every night. Every
Amazing.
night, Seema.
Amazing. And so many stories. So much is happening.
What can people do? Say they have a digital antenna, Seema.
I don't know.
right?
I don't
And
know. I'm not answering you.
I'm
I'm not answering this.
It's
Rescan.
called rescanning.
Rescan.
Rescan that digital antenna. You'll get your Court TV signal, your front row seat to justice. Thanks so much, folks. Thank you, Seema.
Be safe. Be safe out there. You too, Vinny.
This podcast is a production of Court TV. Go to courttv.com for more content, trials on demand, and to find out how to watch Court TV in your area.